about some history. This night is called Remembering the Riots. Stonewall was coined in 1969 for starting the gay revolution. The act that took place inspired many people in the country to realize that they need to act up and the importance of remembering and representing who you are and why you gather in these spaces. In the 1950s and 60s, life for gay people was very hard. There was FBI programs that were raiding gay homes and raiding gay people in neighborhoods. In New York specifically in 1969 in Greenwich Village, there was a mass exodus of gay people and gay rights, and there was police departments that were specifically there to undermine these communities and to put them in the shadows. In that time, gay people could only congregate in spaces that were owned by the mafia, because that somehow fucking makes sense. You can't be queer, but we'll just deal with the mafia and shove you in a shitty piss hole, and it will be fine. That's American politics at its best. 1969. Who doesn't love a 69? Also, I think it's very interesting to remember that there was actually a lot of demonstrations that preceded Stonewall. The reason that Stonewall was so monumental is because in the time of that decade, this was already building up around the country. There was demonstrations in LA, in Chicago, and there was riots that took place in other places that were very important. We have the Compton's Cafeteria riot, and that was in 1966 in San Francisco. We have the Cooper's Donuts riots in 1959, the Dewey's Coffee Shop protests on April 25th, 1965, and of course we lead to Stonewall in 1969. The very first queer organization that started in America to represent queer liberation started actually in 1924. There was a Society for Human Rights that formed, and that was only lasted for 2 to 3 months. That was actually coined as the first technical queer gay activism group in Chicago in 1924. Yes, sir. Mattachine Society was founded in 1950 in San Francisco. Mattachine is coined as a very important gay rights group because they started in the time of the McCarthyism, where McCarthyism labeled homosexuals as being harmful to society, and they also gathered information widely on people that they suspected weren't working for government causes. The importance of the Mattachine Society is because in McCarthyism, they still stood as a communist perspective. They represented this really taboo part of society at the time, but as they evolved, they decided to normalize and deal with more assimilative tactics. Daughters of Bilitis were also formed out of the Mattachine Society, and they formed in San Francisco in 1955. The Daughters of Bilitis are the first feminine, queer, lesbian group. They formed that was in 1955. Yes. The Daughters of Bilitis were the first lesbian and civil political rights organization. Social alternatives to lesbian bars subject to raids and harassment. The focus was to support women afraid to come out, educated about rights and history, and gathered for 14 years. Wow. After Stonewall, sorry, I have like chicken scratch shit notes because I'm a fucking lefty and I don't have my glasses on. Sorry about that.
Got it, girl. Get it. Bring it up. You're doing great, honey.
Yeah, no way.
Get her great. So
1954. So yes, we talked about the Mattachine Society in Los Angeles. It was founded by Harry Hay and started with communist affiliation. Yes. The Gay Liberation Front, I actually want to talk about, which is very important, because the Gay Liberation formed in 1969, immediately after Stonewall in New York. It aimed to provide sexual liberation for all people. It felt that the change would not come unless current social institutions were dismantled and rebuilt with defined sexual roles. They were anti-capitalist and attacked the nuclear family and traditional gender roles. And in November 2nd in Philadelphia, there was a conference that asked for the first Pride March in New York on June 28th in 1979. That was actually the Christopher Street Liberation was formed because of the events that happened on Christopher Street. The first Pride March was the Christopher Street Liberation Day on June 28, 1970. Forwarding a few years in the city of New Orleans, we have the Upstairs Lounge. And a lot of people have been talking about the Upstairs Lounge recently because the anniversary or the date that occurred was actually a few days ago and happened this week as well. And that was when members of the Metropolitan Community Church were gathering in this bar upstairs with a locked door with a stairway leading down to it. A bartender had actually opened the door because he thought there was a taxi cab for one of the patrons. When he opened the door, there was someone that had had leaked lighter fluid all over the stairs and threw a firebomb inside the building. There were metal bars in the windows to prevent people from falling out. 32 people died. The sad part about this was that families declined to claim their bodies, churches refused to bury the dead, and 3 were never identified. The news did also not report or downplay this symbolism and did not mention that it was a hate crime.
Fuck that!
Hate crime! Hate crime! Hate crime!
And lastly, we were going to talk a little bit. I should come more prepared, but you know, I'm a fucking lazy drunk. If anyone is friends with me, you know I'm a fucking lazy ass. Hey girl, we're at the chain drive. Did I mention that we're in the oldest, most disgusting, trashy, fucked up gay bar in this goddamn town? Hello! Windowless pit. We're like a fucking... Yes, we are, you know, one step away from being in Stonewall right now. Except I don't think Mike works for the Mafia, but he might. Still not too sure about that guy.
Have you seen the blonde hair?
I don't know. I also want to talk about ACT UP a little bit because we talk about Stonewall. We credit Stonewall as being part of the gay rights movement. It was the pivoting point for us to recognize and start gathering around the country to recognize who we are and to be present in our community. What I think was actually really interesting following Stonewall is the unexpected situation that occurred in New York and in the 80s around the country where the AIDS pandemic started to hit.
Absolutely.
I think that this is a very interesting part of gay culture because it shows that we have to evolve and that we have to be ready to take care of situations in our community. I believe that being part of the LGBTQ community is recognizing situations and things that are happening that we have to address and that we have to make sure that there are changes present for our future generations.
Which are?
So we talk about ACT UP. Everyone knows who ACT UP, what ACT UP is in this bar. Come on. ACT UP. 1987 in New York City. ACT UP was a direct action group working to impact the lives of people with AIDS, to bring about medical legislation, medical research and treatment, and policies to bring the end of the disease by mitigating loss of health and lives.
Hello!
It was founded by Larry Kramer and others,
Hello!
but about 300 people attend the first meeting. It was organized as a leaderless, anarchist, democratic organization. Actions and proposals were brought to coordinating committee and then to the floor for a vote. The demonstrations to demand greater access to AIDS drugs regulations, they targeted Wall Street, the FDA, medical companies, Ronald Reagan, the Catholic Church, and more.
Who's Ronald Reagan? What's that?
Oh, he's a fucking asshole. No one cares about Reagan. Grand Fury was the artist collective that acted as ACT UP's propaganda mechanism. They were the unofficial propaganda ministry for ACT UP. They created the Silence Equals Death, the Peak Triangles, the Read My Lips campaigns, the campaigns against Ronald Reagan, and the Pope, and more. Queer Nation was also born out of ACT UP with members that were part of ACT UP through the time that it was started.
ACT UP, ACT UP.
Queer Nation started in response to the number of outrage and to the number of escalating anti-LGBTQ violence on the streets and prejudice in the arts and media. It was meant to be confrontational and it was meant to increase visibility of LGBTQ people.
Hello!
The things I mentioned are essentially just a brief rundown of things preceding Stonewall, things dealing with Stonewall, and things that were happening after Stonewall.
Thank you.
We have a lot of things that we've been dealing with in the last few years. We've had a lot of things happen in the last 2 weeks with DOMA, with the issue in the fucking Capitol that was a nightmare. Republicans trying to get up in everyone's vagina. What the fuck?
Absolutely.
We have a lot we're working on. We have a lot as a community. We have a lot to go. Remembering Stonewall and remembering these riots are very essential to making sure that we maintain the liberties and the freedoms that we seek to accomplish.
Recognize.
Issues. And in the past, with all of these other protests and demonstrations, they all dealt with queer and marginalized people, people of color, people that lived on the streets, people that were hustlers, and people that were drag queens. They were the people that brought out this anger, and they represented why they needed to be seen and why our community is very important. Someone who shut the fuck up for a second. I just wanted to have my moment. We are gonna start the show.